Okay, we are back on Talkback Now. That's John King. I'm Peter Christian. All done talking about Tom Brady and Deflategate now.
I highly doubt that. I'm sure Lorna will be listening to this all day long.
I'm sure she will. Okay, so let's introduce our guest.
Sure. We've got Luke Popovitch on our show today. He's a spokesperson for the National Mining Association. And we're going to be talking about the EPA's Clean Power Plan. I was promised by the forerunner of Luke Popovitch, the angelic emissary, that we would be talking about how this is impacting Montana, or will be, and how it might affect our energy prices and our mining industry. So, Luke, thanks for coming on the program with us this morning.
Thank you. I'm told I have a face for radio, so maybe this is a good fit.
Well, join the club, because that's why we're here today. So anyway.
Let's start by just giving a quick primer on the EPA's Clean Power Plan. Give everybody a quick background on what this is, when it came out, and what the impact, as you see it, will be.
Sure. The President Obama announced this plan on August 3rd, and essentially he calls it the centerpiece of his broad plan to address climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, in this case, from power plants in the United States. This would be mostly coal-based power plants, but also natural gas-fired plants, both of which have carbon emissions. So the idea is EPA has decided they're going to set a nationwide greenhouse gas reduction target that all the states have to meet based on their own configuration of energy, knowing that Montana is different than New Hampshire. The problem is EPA does not know what they're doing. They are an environmental agency that is attempting nothing less than what they admit is a transformation of the nation's energy grid. And we think the plan that they've put out, that the president has supported, is completely impractical. It's going to basically take out your most affordable energy sources for electricity, which would be coal and slow natural gas use, and replace those in very short order with more renewable fuels generated electricity from wind and solar.
Why is that impractical?
Normally, it's impractical simply because, number one, the renewables are intermittent sources of power. They're not baseload sources of power. That is, they can't generate electricity reliably 24/7. While you're sleeping, you still want, when it's sun is not shining, you would still like electricity to be running your refrigerator.
Sure.
And when the wind doesn't blow, you still expect air conditioning in your house. And while the amount of electricity generated by renewables is a good thing, certainly, and it's been growing, it's still no more than 5% of the total baseload power output for electricity in the United States.
Which is the reason why they call it alternative energy, right?
That's correct.
Well,
that's correct.
A lot of people would say, would hear you and say, hey, but we're going to have newer technologies, and not only that, but if we have more diversity in the number of alternative energy sources out on the grid, then it'll be more regular. I don't know if that's the proper alternative to intermittent.
Right.
It'll be more mittent than if we have just a few sources that we have now and are totally reliant on these base sources.
No, I think that's a logical question, but it rests on not very good information. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you can't number one, you can't expect the nation's power grid to suddenly produce the infrastructure that will be needed, the transmission lines, the wind turbines, the solar panels, to ramp up renewable fuels from 5% to take over the amount of electricity that's going to be left in the grid when we knock out all this coal and slow natural gas generation. That is simply not possible, and trying to do that will simply be very, very expensive, particularly for states like Montana that have heavily relied on on fossil fuels to generate electricity, because in this plan, EPA is particularly punishing states like yours. So you've got the cost involved of paying for replacing perfectly good generation with new generation. Then you've got the fact that these fuels are heavily subsidized by the taxpayer anyway. I mean, wind and solar, obviously they're all good. We're not saying we don't need them, but these are very heavily subsidized sources of power. So you're going to be paying in two different ways. And in particular in Montana and states like Montana, you're also going to be paying in a third way. You're going to be paying not only more for the subsidy, for your tax dollars, more for the electricity on your utility bill, you're also going to be paying for job losses that are going to come from your fossil energy industries, and you're going to be paying for the lost revenue that those industries like coal provide for Montana. So there's clearly going to be a large cost to be borne, and this is what EPA has not been honest about. And I'm happy to also talk about what they're not honest about on the environmental side.
All right, Luke, let's do that right after the break. I also want to talk to you about something called Electron Laundering. Will the EPA's Clean Power Plan give Canada an economic edge over the United States? We'll get back to that in just a second.
Wow, stay with us. Hey, thanks for joining us on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. Joining us this morning from Washington, D.C., Luke Popovitch, the National Mining Association. Now, you just brought up a very interesting, very intriguing term there, John.
Yeah, so electron laundering. It's not my term. It's actually a term coined by Chuck DeVore, as far as I know. He's an opinionator over on Forbes. But it's about the idea that, anytime you put a legal constraint on making money, people will find a way around it and make money. And there's this particular thing is happening with our neighbor to the north, the Canadians. So in 2006, California went ahead and they put constraints on the energy that they would buy. They wanted to focus on green energy, right? We probably remember this pretty well as Montanans because we were selling some of that energy down to California. Well, Canada was trying to do that too. So what they would do is they would sell the green electrons down to California.
Right.
At night, they would buy cheap coal from America, use the coal to pump their industry up to keep things going, and then sell the green electrons in the morning. And that's what
expensive electrons.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So they would make money on the green electrons, and the other electrons they would use to pump up the energy.
What a deal!
Yeah, it's a great deal, right? And so,
well, the president is actually proposing something very similar, but for United States and China. What he's basically doing with this plan, he wants to take this plan to Paris at the UN climate conference in early December, and try to persuade China and India, who are the big greenhouse gas emitters in the world, to be foolish enough to raise their electricity cost in their countries, just as he is proposing to do here in the United States. And that would be persuading them, just because we're cutting back on our most affordable sources of power, why don't they do that as well and use more expensive sources just as we are going to use? That will, of course, the Chinese and Indians know that they've got, about 1.3 billion people who don't even have electricity. They're not about to raise the energy costs sharply and prevent these people from getting electricity for another generation, at the same time making their industries less competitive with the United States, as this president has done to our industries. So there's really I think a hidden agenda here, which is to say this president is going to be the climate president, but he's doing so at the expense of American industries, to say nothing of American households.
Well, here's how I see it. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I often am. All right? In three different, very important areas, the Obama administration is making one thing very clear, whether it's from health care, whether it's in energy, such as the Clean Power Plan, and whether it's water, which was just the Waters of the U.S. Decision also put forth by the EPA. so many of those, both the EPA plans went before Congress and were soundly defeated. And so the President of the United States, who it's plain to me, and I guess I could be getting this wrong, the President of the United States is saying, you people don't know what's good for you. So I am going to be the national dad, okay, and I'm going to withhold your allowance and or whatever it is, whatever dads do.
He's the chief executive.
I'm going to do whatever it takes because I know what's good for you. I know about this clean energy. I know about this clean power plan. I know about this clean water plan. And if your silly representatives in Washington don't buy into this, I'm just going to go around them and do the right thing. And eventually you will love me for it. So am I right or not?
I think you're absolutely right. I think this is, again, another point that people are overlooking is the pattern of this administration. They are so beholden to green activists that they will virtually do anything, no matter how unpopular it is. No matter that the representatives of American voters have constantly rejected a climate plan very similar to the one that he's offering, simply because Congress is unwilling to impose these costs on Americans. And there's another aspect to this I started on that I think is particularly troublesome, and I think if most people knew about it, they would be doubly concerned. That is that for all the cost of this rule, it's going on your average electricity bill, it achieves virtually no environmental benefit. If you look at the EPA's rule in fine print, they show that greenhouse gas concentrations would be reduced by an infinitesimal amount by 2030, and that the temperature would be reduced so little it's not even measurable. We're talking about hundreds of 1%.
Now, I think a lot of people on the other side would say, yeah, but those little degrees really matter.
Exactly.
Because we're pushing ourselves closer to the edge with each degree.
Yeah. It costs me nothing, and any advantage, however incremental and infinitesimal, is considered to be positive. They seem to have no understanding, and this is interesting for an administration that always talks about income disparity, the growing income disparity and the shrinking middle class. Why are they imposing on the middle class, the shrinking middle class, what is essentially a stealth energy tax? Everyone needs electricity, and whether you're poor or rich, you're going to have to pay for it. You certainly want air conditioning in the summer if you're poor as much as you do if you're rich. The problem is it's going to be the poor that are going to be spending a lot more of their discretionary income just for a basic service like electricity. And why is it this administration is so blind to the consequences of their own environmental policies? I don't know.
Now, Luke, this is interesting you would say that, because in my conversations with weather folk, they have told me that this next winter could be similar to last winter in that the Northeast is going to be hit very, very hard with, there's snowpocalypse or snow, what do they call it, snowzilla or whatever they're going to call it.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the Northwest is supposed to be bitterly cold, perhaps more than it has been. And so I got a great idea. Let's make the price of electricity to heat our homes that much more expensive as we're going into what we know will be another brutal winter. I think that's a great idea, don't you?
It's a great idea. How that is going to help close this income disparity gap, I tell you, I don't know. It's as if there are two different presidents. One speaks on one issue, the other one contradicts him and speaks on another. But there's no way that you can square the environmental policies of this administration, particularly the clean power plan that's going to raise costs on everybody, including the very poorest, with the many pronouncements they have made about rebuilding the middle class and strengthening the household budgets and helping the poor. They're completely at odds.
Okay, I tell you what, we're up against a break. Luke Popovitch joining us. We also have a caller that wants to visit with you, and perhaps we have a little bit of a contrary statement. Harry is going to be coming up in just a moment. 721-1290 is our number.
And we're going to open our lines. We want them filled by the end of the break. So call 721-1290.
We'll be right back.
That's right.
721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. And we're visiting with Luke Popovitch, the National Mining Association. And Luke is talking to us from Washington, D.C. And we do have, let's see, Harry's on the line, wants to visit with you. And Harry, good morning. You're on with Luke. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. I from what I understand, this is supposed to last there. It won't, it'll be a gradual thing until 2030, right? So it's not something overnight. That's not going to be tomorrow, not going to be next week. It's not going to be, affect this next winter. So, I mean, 15 years, that's not just overnight. That's pretty, a decent amount of time. I think we got people who are smart enough to try to figure this stuff out in 15 years.
Hey, Luke, what do you think?
Actually, it's not quite true. EPA is requiring all states to submit their plans on how they're going to implement this rule in just 2 years. That means that they're going to have to start making decisions right now about what plants they're going to shut down and how they're going to replace those plants with different energy sources. That's going to take an enormous amount of time. The utilities themselves have complained that they can't possibly meet these deadlines. And particularly now that in the final rule, the incentives for building in renewable fuels are even greater, but at the same time, the disincentives to substitute the gap that's going to be created by lost coal.
Harry?
You have a reduction in the amount of gas and coal you can use. At the same time, the administration is forcing renewables in. That's going to be extremely costly. You're going to have to build out. Yeah.
I hear
that. Go ahead.
I hear you.
Go ahead, Harry. Sorry.
I hear that you keep saying slow down natural gas, but I don't hear that at all. I hear others saying, well, we're going to be replacing coal with natural gas. It just makes sense. If you have coal pumping out, megatons of carbon, and you can cut that in half, or even better yet, with natural gas, it's like, well, it's going to slow down natural gas. I think it's just the opposite. I think it'll increase natural gas as a filler gap until we get more, renewable sources. So,
well, see, the thing that I think is interesting, that I think was Luke's point, is that we know what
to a certain extent.
Well,
we know what the carbon output is for both natural gas and for coal. They both have a carbon footprint. They both actually spew other gases as well. But here's the question. All of these plans, to Harry's point, all of these plans have to be made now with the technology we have now. We can't rely on some future technology to make the plans. So we know we're shooting ourselves in the face.
But we know, like I say, we know how much carbon coal and natural gas puts out. And coal puts out so much more that, and we're not trying to do away with all carbon. We're just trying to decrease. So I mean, if you replace every coal plant with a natural gas, I bet that would be more than enough to carbon deduction to meet whatever requirements.
No,
even the Obama administration isn't sure of that.
Well,
but
here's the point.
You know how much coal and how much gas put out, so I mean, you should be able to figure it out. It's not, it doesn't take a wizard to do that.
Well, hang on, Larry. Luke wants to respond.
Here's the point. Harry's got a good point that natural gas has been taking more electricity share in the marketplace from coal, but that's precisely what bothered the green activists who are aligned with the EPA. So when they put out the final rule, they put in disincentives for natural gas because they feared that natural gas would come in too fast, as it has been doing, and it is a carbon-based fuel, although, as Harry says, it's not as carbon-intensive as coal, but the EPA did not want that to happen. So they've now made it more costly by making it harder for natural gas to come into the marketplace, which is one reason why the gas industry is suddenly not very happy with this rule that they thought they would benefit from. So the EPA is essentially stopping a logical progression that was happening in the marketplace and is now already, simply because they did not want this very thing to happen. They did not want gas to come in and replace coal.
Okay, just one more point before I'm sure I've taken enough time. But the idea that this is, I thought the whole idea was that it's giving the states they're not telling them how to do it. They're just saying, this is what we want. This is our goal. We're going to decrease carbon by so much. It's up to you to figure it out. So,
that is what they. That is indeed what they said. What they've been saying.
Yeah,
they're saying that we're giving states a lot of flexibility, but in fact, in the final rule, they've taken away much of the flexibility that they've given states. That was all in the proposed rule. What happened was the EPA lawyers looked at what was in the proposed rule and realized that the flexibility they were offering states was basically illegal. The one big example would be efficiency. EPA had been touting for over 2 years that by simply allowing states to impose more efficiency requirements on their state's power grid, they'd be able to meet this goal with very little cost. Only it turns out that EPA could not legally require states to do that because they don't have the authority. So the efficiency option, if you will, was removed. So they can't reach the goal by simply being more efficient. They have to reach the goal in more technical ways, and that's what I said at the outset. That's what EPA doesn't have the technical competence to command the states to do.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break at this point. We have Alan and Mike who both want to visit with you. Go ahead, John.
I did have one quick point to Harry's questions. I think it's interesting if you note the people that have come out against the Clean Power Plan, including our governor, a Democrat, right, Steve Bullock. And the reason why is because it adversely affects some states more than others. Imagine if you're a state like Montana who uses coal generation or natural gas generation and now having to switch and build up a whole infrastructure when your economy is not the strongest it's ever been and fragile in many places, especially back east where the coal and the petroleum industries are suffering.
Not only that, but we are the 49th state in per capita income, 49th out of 50. So let's make it more difficult to make money for businesses here. So we're going to take a break. We'll come right back. Alan and Mike, I want to visit with Luke Popovitch. We'll be right back. Here we go. Okay, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. That's the ever-voguing John King over there. I'm Peter Christian, joining us on the phone, Luke Popovitch with the National Mining Association. Before we get to our next caller, Luke, you were trying to talk when we went into the break, so go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that the previous the caller had it partly right. That gas has been taking more of the market share from coal in generating electricity, but unfortunately, the administration has also blocked natural gas in this final rule from taking a bigger share because they want renewables to come in and take more of it. That sounds on its face like a good thing, but the fact is the cost of doing that, of putting subsidized natural gas in and then building up all the transmission and infrastructure that will be required to move renewable fuels up to the point where they can substitute for coal and gas will be an enormous cost.
Can I ask a quick question? And again, this is a dangerous question to ask, but if the EPA backed off, okay, and allowed, if you will, quote, the market, end quote, to dictate how this is all going to happen. Because if you look down the line, you can see eventually the end of coal, all right, eventually. Yeah. You can see eventually where natural gas is going to go. And if entrepreneurs are allowed to go ahead and experiment and work and do success and trial and error with windmills and solar and all this, somebody's going to eventually invent a battery that can store the energy, so we don't have to worry about not being a steady source of energy. Is it just that they're so impatient for that for them they can't wait for that to happen, or what?
Impatient might be a polite word. I mean, but I think you're on to something. The marketplace is already reducing the amount of carbon in the atmosphere in the United States. In fact, unlike Europe, and certainly unlike Asia, which is the big emitter, the United States over the last decade has completely flattened out its carbon emissions. Now, the recession has been largely responsible for that, but natural gas has substituted for coal in a lot of electricity generation. Their share now is up to about 32% from 21% just 10 years ago, whereas coal's share has dropped from about 51% to about 39% today. So you can see the market is moving in that direction. Unfortunately, the administration doesn't like the marketplace, and motivated.
But they don't trust it.
They don't trust it, and I think the president, frankly, wants a legacy so he can, as I said at the outset, the president wants a legacy so when he steps out of office, he can say, I'm the climate change president. He's going to have a legacy of higher energy prices, too, but you're not going to hear about that.
I think that the president and many of the people on the left honestly see it this way, and I think that they're partially right. I think that they see the law as having leverage over innovation, and that by constraining the market, you're basically putting a bigger price tag on innovation in alternative energies here. Yep. And they believe that they're going to drive new technology in this realm, and it'll benefit everybody.
Well, unfortunately, the way the rule is working, the regulations are working from EPA, you're not going to be able to even use the most advanced clean coal technologies, like, not to get too technical here, but what's called ultra supercritical and gasification. You're not going to be able to use those technologies in any new coal plant you build because EPA deliberately set the CO2 reduction standard to the point where even those technologies will not satisfy them.
When I use gasification at home, my wife gets ultra supercritical.
Yeah. All right. Let's get Alan on the line. Alan, you're on with Luke Popovitch. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning. I find it interesting. We talk about carbon pollution, but scientifically, coal-fired power plants or even gas-fired power plants do not produce carbon. It is carbon dioxide. Carbon is an element. It's number 6 on the periodic table. Carbon dioxide is a compound. A compound is a substance that contains one or more constituent elements having properties on the whole different from those of their constituent elements. So we're producing carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. In fact, to break carbon dioxide into its components, oxygen and carbon, there's only one process in nature that does that, and that process is life. Without carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, life ceases. Dr. Patrick Moore, the co-founder of Greenpeace, recently published an article in which he has scientific research showing that if the atmospheric carbon dioxide levels drop below 150 parts per million, all life on planet Earth ceases. At our current rate of about 400 parts per million, our plant life is suffering carbon dioxide starvation. And to have abundant plant life, the carbon dioxide levels need to be at about 1,500 parts per million. So we're attacking, by these regulations, the government is attacking life itself.
Wow. Alan, we're up against the break. I know Luke wants to respond to what you just said, so we'll do that when we come back. We have a line open. Mike, we're going to get you up in just a moment. 721-1290 is our number. Stay with us. We're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. John King's over there. I'm Peter Christian. Joining us on the phone from Washington, D.C. and the National Mining Association, Luke Popovitch. And Alan just made some interesting points, and I know you wanted to comment on them. Luke, go ahead.
Hey, Luke, can you hear us?
Should be there.
Well, anyway, let me read this while we try to figure that out. I'll pick up this.
Yeah, let me just put him on hold. Hold on.
Okay.
Try that.
Luke, are you there?
Do. We lost him?
Looks like we lost him.
Okay,
so
well, hopefully
we'll
he'll
wait
call
for
back.
him to call back.
All right, hopefully he will call back.
In the meanwhile, I'll read this real quick.
Okay.
This is so each state has a different goal, right? Because we each produce a different amount of CO2
right
under the Clean Power Plan. Some of the states have a much higher bar to jump, and one of the states that has the highest bar is Montana. So North Dakota needs to change its output by 37%. They need to drop their emissions by 37%.
Wow.
Kansas by 35%, Iowa by 34%, and Montana by 33%. That's a drop by a third of our emissions. Now, it doesn't work that way for every state. Idaho, for example, can increase their CO2 output by 133%. They could pump up enough CO2 to balance out all of the top 6.
Wow.
And why is that?
Because they have nuclear.
Exactly. The next big one is Washington. Washington can pump out 57% more CO2 if they like.
Why?
Because of nuclear.
Yeah, nuclear
and dams.
And lots of hydro, yeah.
Yeah, so if you happen to have been blessed with a dam in your state and haven't destroyed it like Oregon yet, or if you happen to have a nuclear facility that was built before 3 Mile Island and isn't Fukushima, then you have the opportunity here to pump out a lot more coal.
Well, do we have a number for Luke?
Sure, I can look it up.
Give him a call.
You want to
back.
go to a quick break and I'll
Yeah,
grab
let's
that?
do that. We'll take a quick break. I'm sorry about that. Mike and Raina, we'll get you on here just a moment. For some reason, I had a little bit of a technical difficulty here, and we lost our guest, Luke Popovitch. So why don't you just go ahead and dial, and I'll just entertain the masses. No, okay. We'll take a 1-minute timeout. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Talk Back, and unfortunately we had a technical difficulty. We had a little blip there and lost Luke Popovitch, the National Mining Association, but that's okay because we have our callers on the line who want to make a comment. Mike, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's too bad he's off there because my solution to this whole project is really quite simple. There are 50 sovereign states in this United States. Why do they have to bow down to the EPA? And they just say, get out of my state and stay the heck out of my state. And by the way, do you have an army to invade me, or are you going to blow up my coal-fired plant? No, it's time. You cannot keep bowing down and kissing their royal butts and getting away with this. You have got to stand up and say, this is where we stop. It's our business. Stay the hell out of our place.
Now
that is what needs to be done, and until that's done, nothing is going to happen.
Well,
You're going to,
Well, Mike, that's exactly what's happening right now with the waters of the U.S. We have like 13 states and now more than 30 states have joined in this lawsuit, federal lawsuit, to put their clean waters of the U.S. Limitations on hold, and so when I visited with Attorney General Fox yesterday, okay, I asked him about this. And he said, if the judge does rule that particular hold on what the EPA is doing is considered to be over all 50 states instead of just the 13 that filed, and the EPA continues to do what they want to do, despite the federal court ruling, they could find themselves in contempt of federal court.
Yeah, and they won't do a dadgum thing about it because, after all, Harry Reid's in contempt of federal court and a bunch of other people. But here's what needs to be done. The governors need to stand up and say, EPA, that farmer's little pond, and I know the one on that TV they're talking about, that guy owes like $37 million now because he built a stock pond. It's time to say, you have no business checking that out. You cross the border, we're going to bounce your butt back across the border if we have to hire the National Guard to do it. You are not coming in here without proper warrants and proper things because it's none of your blankety-blank business, and stand up and do something. Going to court is going to do the same thing. You're going to make a bunch of lawyers rich, and you're going to wind up with the same darn thing you got anyway because you know which way it's going to go.
Okay.
I guarantee you. That's what I'd like to just once. Somebody stand up, a governor somewhere, and say, stand up. It's just like when desegregation. The guy might have been a nutcase for surrounding the school with a National Guard, but at least he stood up. And that's more than what we do. Stand up and say, you are not welcome in our state, so stay the heck out of it. That's it. Until that happens, we're going to be still bending over and kissing and say, what can we do for you now, sir?
Okay, Mike, thanks.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks for the call. All right. Is he actually Donald Trump in disguise?
I don't know.
I don't know. Raina, you're on Talkback. Thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Hi. I read a review of the financing on one of the wind farms in Montana. It's been years ago, but
okay.
It turns out, and I was going to ask your guest to correct me if I'm wrong, but those tax credits, which is basically cash from the American taxpayer, all went directly to big European banks in places like Belgium.
Well, they could have, yeah.
If it doesn't seem logical, it's because there is big money involved. And it's those money forces like the nuclear
Well, isn't Irena, isn't it interesting that much of the criticism towards what's happening with coal and oil is they say it's big coal and it's big oil and they're flexing their muscles, but we're going to use the EPA to crush them so that we can have big windmills and big solar, you know what I mean, to just come right in and supplant that.
Luke's on line 1.
Yes, okay. All right, well, Raina, thanks for the call.
You bet.
Have a great day. So, Luke, you're back.
And while you were gone, Luke, Mike called in and said, hey, we need to confront, as the states, we need to confront this federal bureaucracy and stand up for what we believe and stop kissing the king's feet, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess my question for you is, what now?
Well, I think that's a good question. And one of the things that you're going to see in the coming weeks is states like Montana, many others, including various industry groups and our own, going to the courts and challenging the legality of this law and asking the federal courts to rule in our favor.
That doesn't. The problem with that is it's going on right now. But what the EPA said, and I'm sure you saw the AP story, the 13 or the 30 states that filed, because I spoke with our Attorney General Tim Fox about it. Is that the EPA said, well, that's fine for you guys, but we're going to go ahead and implement it in all the other states that weren't part of that lawsuit. Well, now they went back to that federal judge so that he could say, no, I meant all 50 states, not just the 13 that filed. So, and all those briefs had to be handed in yesterday to support that decision.
Is that for clean power or for water?
You're talking about the water.
I'm talking about water. I'm talking. Yeah, but that's water. I'm not talking about energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed that part while I was off the phone.
Yeah.
Well, it's a win-win, really. I mean, the EPA really wants you to draft a plan and start to change your lifestyle and get with it. And if you don't, we're going to hit you with a hammer. And they know, I think they're going to lose at the Supreme Court, just like they did the last time when they tried to overrule the industry.
So let's get as much done as we can before that.
Yeah, and so they have a calculated response here. Yeah, we might lose, but in the meantime, we're going to shake things up. We're going to get stuff done, and we can do it all through executive action.
Well, they did the same thing. There was a terrific example of this just 2 months ago. The Supreme Court, if you recall, struck down what was called the mercury and air toxics rule. Now, that was a rule that was put in effect by EPA in 2012. And even though it was ruled unlawful just a few weeks ago, in that time, EPA was able to shut down about 60 gigawatts of coal-fired power plants. These were very reliable, useful plants that supplied affordable energy. So when the Supreme Court said, but you can't do this, this is against the law, EPA said, oh, gosh, sorry, but, we've already achieved our goal. That's what many people think is likely, is their thinking in this case with the Clean Power Plan.
Sure.
And with the waters of the United States. They throw out an outrageous rule that's far beyond their authority. They know that it's going to take 6 months or a year to work this through the courts, and by that time they'll have achieved the destruction that they say is progress.
And just to localize this point a little bit, we lost a coal plant out of Billings,
right?
And the other plants had to make upgrades, which they've already paid for and invested in, and you, energy ratepayer, are going to be paying for those upgrades. I asked the PSC, the Public Service Commission, hey, are we going to get soaked with these upgrades even though the Supreme Court said they weren't needed or required? And they said, yeah, I mean, it was the law. What are we going to do?
Sure. No, you've got to. The bills have to be paid, and the bills are going to be paid when you don't have the power generation you need. You've got a less diverse, less reliable grid to rely on when you do have a tough winter.
Wow. Well, let's get another caller on. Candy, you're on with Luke Popovitch. Go ahead.
Hi, Luke. You make a lot of common sense, and I agree fully with Mike, and I agree on the basis that these are all administrative laws, and we should be standing up for against them, and we should do that with everything that's coming out of Washington, D.C., stopping us from basically living and taking away our money to live on. And I see that it's a sad state of affairs, that we are so frightened by our own government that we collapse under their laws, and it's administrative world, and I can't find in the Constitution anywhere where we are supposed to bend our knee to this government constantly. And that's why I think anybody with a strong backbone to stand up against this needs the floor, so we stop doing it.
Candy, we've got to let you go. I appreciate your call. So we have about 2 minutes left, Luke. So if you could just wrap up, tell us, here at good old Missoula, Montana, we call it River City, what can we do to make any difference in this, aside from just stand back and watch?
I think one of the things you can do is get online and go on countoncoal.org, and you'll find a website filled with data and all the information you need to write your congressman, write your state legislators, write your governor, and simply say, as this past woman, as your caller just said, we're tired of being frightened by our own government, and we want a voice in how we're being regulated and how we're being governed. Countoncoal.org is a site that's supported by an organization that includes the entire coal supply chain in your state. So from the railroads to the power plants and to the coal mines and the machinery manufacturers. And all the data on there is government figures. It's not coal industry figures and data. And I think you'll find yourself very well informed by reading that site.
Right.
And
hey, Luke, we're like almost completely out of time.
Okay.
Is there like a website we can get more of your information?
Yeah, that's countoncoal.org.
Got it. Okay.
Countoncoal.org. And I appreciate the time you guys are giving me.
Thanks, Luke. Good to talk to you. Luke Popovitch, and wow, interesting. So what's coming up on tomorrow's fabulous radio program?
Open phones chaos.
Yeah, because tomorrow is Friday. And so that means we have it's going to be the first hunting show of the season.
Oh, really?
It'll be not catching the big ones, but it'll be Hunter's Breakfast live from, so I will go from Peter Perch to Peter Rabbit.
Hunting the big ones.
Yes.
It's bow season.
Whatever I'm going to do.
I'm sure Peter's getting his bow on
absolutely. You guys have a great day. See you tomorrow.